My name's Derek Walter. This is our farm Koolah in Willow Creek on the Fleurieu Peninsula. We are running about 80 beef breeders here on 150 hectares. We sort of converted our system over to a regenerative model over the last 4 or 5 years, progressively, pulling out things like chemical fertilizers and chemical sprays because everything's getting more expensive. So we really cut down on the inputs that we were spending money on and started looking at different ways to get decent productivity out of the ground that we've got. One of the biggest problems we've got here is Koolah grass. It's very invasive, it takes over. If you don't put in a fair bit of effort to get rid of it, it sort of takes over the place. So we were really looking for a system that we could minimise the Koolah proliferation and maximise other multi-species plants for grazing. We have mainly sandy soils here. We go from really white glacial sands through to what we term a loamy sand. It's pretty much just sand with a bit more colour in it. We're sitting on an annual rainfall of about 780 mils, but we range from 650 through to 1150. Some of our higher country, which is the heavier country, has a little bit more clay in it, a little bit more silt, and that's always been our most productive ground. A lot easier to get ryegrasses to persist. So ryegrass, clover, pasture bases is what we've always traditionally looked towards. And we're now coming to realise that because of the high inputs, a lot of this country is quite heavily compacted. And I think one of the things that we've been missing in our soils is oxygen. So to let that microbial activity breathe and let those plants really take hold and persist with vigour. So we moved into regen ag basically because of the cost of production. When I left uni, had only just started back in beef from a dairy system. We were based on high inputs, high production, trying to utilise the high rainfall that we've got to maximum efficiency. But when the beef prices didn't follow the cost of inputs up, as everything started increasing in price, beef cattle didn't get any more valuable, and so it got more and more important to really work out what inputs were the most important and to start pulling out some of the ones that were less important. So we started looking into alternate fertilizers, so worm castings and other worm juices and things like that. We did trials on way back in the mid-2000s, but the problem was because we were coming out of a high input system, we didn't get the production benefits out of those more organic and biological amendments. And so we really struggled to find anything that could compete with the chemical input system. But in the last few years, I came to realise that the only way that you can make the most out of a biological system is to totally remove the chemicals from it. So we made the decision to stop fertilising altogether. The last time we fertilised was for hay cut, I think 5 years ago, and we just made a decision that we would try everything that we could to maximise our production without going back to that system. As we started changing our grazing management, we got such a lot bigger benefit out of changing the grazing management rather than reverting back to same old chemical inputs. First management change we made a concerted effort on was grazing management. We tried to follow the holistic grazing system, Allen Savory method, which was a big change going from traditional rotational grazing under high input. We really struggled for a couple of years doing that because we weren't getting our stocking rates right. We had a very uneven system of grazing through our paddocks because of the change. Then we changed over to what's now called Nature's Equity type of system. I saw Dick Richardson speak at a few different field days, and his system involves disrupting the cycle a lot more than the holistic grazing system did. And so he implements a period of rest for a period of time. We've chosen to trial it for 12 months in our system. So we rest 25 to 30 hectares of our grazing land for 12 months in any rotation. What that has enabled us to do was to really prioritise the grazing on other parts of the farm and leave other parts of the farm to rest. And what we found was that a lot of pastures and seed that was in the system that weren't germinating under our previous regime actually got a chance to germinate and survive and thrive. So even on some of our Koolah ground, we were getting Fertilizers come through that hadn't been added into the system for sort of 40 or 50 years. So we were getting a lot of new growth that we didn't even realise was there just by implementing that longer rest. And when we implemented it, we didn't actually think it would make a difference. But having done it now, I think that's one of the best parts of our system now, being able to pull out a section of our farm and let it rest for a period of time. The most recent change that we've made was the purchase of a soil key renovator. That machine has an action a lot like a rotary hoe, but it only disturbs 17% of the pasture. So what it enables us to do is to drill in new seed, and we're using multi-species varieties, 15 to 18 different varieties, and it enables us to plant it straight into a Koolah pasture without the need for sprays or herbicides or insecticides. Really gets new seed established in the soil in fairly clean furrows, but it leaves 80% of the pasture untouched. And that enables the microbial activity to continue and to thrive, maximise the small amount of disturbance we are creating whilst adding new seed to the system. So you can see behind me there's some cereals that are popping up through the Koolah, yet as you look at it from a distance it really doesn't look like we've done much to it. We're hoping that by adding in summer forage varieties into the mix, we'll be able to get that feed gap in summer reduced or gotten rid of totally, so that we can really go from spring through summer and then hit the next season into autumn with very little feed disruption. And or if we're destocking and selling off yearlings over that period, we'll really get a feed bank in the system for autumn. So in this paddock I'm using the soil key renovator just for aeration. The cows behind us have just come out of this paddock. They've had one day grazing in here. This is a sector of our farm that we're classing as priority this year. Basically, as soon as there's any amount of grass that is edible for the cattle in this section, which is about 26 hectares, we're coming back and we're running them over it again. At the moment I'm going to be aerating each of these paddocks after the cows come out of it, because we're finding that within 4 or 5 weeks the pasture is back to actively growing and it's all edible again. So we're only losing about maybe 2 weeks in that grazing cycle. While it looks like quite a disturbance, there's only 17% of this soil being turned up, and it's actually covering the existing pasture. And over the next couple of weeks, especially if we get some decent rains, that will all wash off back down under the green and it's all edible again. It's been really astounding actually how quick the paddocks are bouncing back. We're in two minds at the moment because it's fairly costly with the price of diesel to run it across the paddock, but we're in the trial phase of this machine, so we really have to try every different idea that we have at the moment, work out which ones are worth it and which ones aren't. Our greatest challenges getting into regen have been mainly changing the way that we think about planning and what we're looking for as an outcome versus being profit oriented and trying to make the most out of the dollars that we put in. So we're really trying to ignore the cost if we can, whilst keeping within budgets of course. When you're focusing on soil health, it's really hard to justify every dollar that you put in because there's so much unseen benefit that you get out of it. I don't feel like we've had any real regen ag successes, apart from the fact that it seems to be easier to do what we're doing now. It seems to be more beneficial for the health of the soil, the health of the plant. So I don't see it so much as a success versus a failure. It's just the way that we've decided to minimise our input cost has resulted in us ending up in the regen ag sphere and going into the soil key machine for a specific purpose, which then that flowed on to carbon credits and that flowed on to thinking about things like agroforestry. All the little flow-on effects that we haven't really seen a financial benefit from now. We're really looking forward to what type of benefit they'll be in the future. Farming at the moment is really about the enjoyment of it. It used to be very much an accounting exercise of how much money we could put in versus how much money we can get out. And now that has sort of been removed from the equation. We're going out, checking soil health, checking pasture health, trying new things with the soil key renovator, trying different regimes of grazing. It used to be that we just rotationally grazed because that's what agronomists said was the best way to make the most out of your pasture. Now we're trying new things because without the financial burden of having to make a dollar out of every dollar you spend, we have removed that necessity, and so everything we try has an opportunity. So our family's been on this farm since 1949, and I've just grown up with the farm being there. For a lot of my childhood, it was just the backdrop to all the other stuff that we did. When I came home from uni, it was a way to try and make money out of doing an activity that we loved. And now it's not so much even about the money, it's about getting out there, spending time on the farm, spending time with the kids on weekends and things like that. You know, all of that is incorporated in everything that we do every day now.